when we're doing this Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha, it's a great opportunity for us not just to think of the teachers whom we have directly benefited from in our own lifetimes, but also to recognize that this knowledge that we are receiving is coming from ages, it's coming from millennia down. And there has been a whole parampara of teachers that have kept all this knowledge alive. So, in a sense, I'm also inviting you to expand your consciousness when you are doing this Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha, and allow yourself to feel the span of time. And in that, do this kind of a offering of oneself. Okay. And then Harihi Om. And maybe I'll just explain this Harihi Om and then we do it actually so it becomes more meaningful. So the words themselves, Shri Guru Bhyo. So Shri implies someone who's very wealthy, but wealthy in terms of all kinds of wealth, beauty wealth, financial wealth, every kind of knowledge wealth. So Shri is a very complete term. It means beauty, wealth, and all of that put together. Guru Bhyo. So Guru, literally, one who removes the darkness. So Guru Bhyaha, it's in the plural, to all of them. Okay, so it's to all these. Guru Bhyaha becomes Guru Bhyo because of a Sandhi factor. Okay, we learn about these Sandhis, which are phonetic variations that take place in words. Okay, so Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha, when we salute, offering our salutation. So when we have the word Namaste, it is actually Namaha Te, salute you. It's a verb form there. Okay, Namaha Te. And you can have Namaskara. Namahakara is like Ahankara, doing of Namaste. So that's a basic difference in the way the word has been formed. So some tend to say Namaskar and some tend to say Namaste. So Namaste has a more active thing. Like I am saluting to you. And Namaskara is Aham Namaskaram Karomi. Means I am doing the gesture of Namaste. Okay, it's important to understand that. So Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha, an offering, a salutation. And Namaha literally means to bow down, to put that. And that is also physiologically, from a postural point of view, it is literally a recognition that I'm there to receive. So this psychological movement is very important because it's only when the cup is down that it can then receive new things. So this movement is important psychologically. And then Harihi Om. Harihi comes from the root Hr. Hr. So I'd like everybody to do that actually. It's a fantastic word. It's a fantastic root. Hr. Hr. So if you're feeling it can be quite taxing also. Okay. So Hr is a remover of all obstacles. Okay, R means it comes from the verb that comes from there, that is derived from there, is harati, one who removes. Okay, and in terms of the physiological placing of it, also it's very interesting because it has this kind of a letting go of all the extra accumulated prana in the system, the unwanted. So harihi is the remover of all kinds of obstacles, one who removes, one who takes away. So it can be the Lord, and it can be, when we're talking of the Lord, we tend to associate them with beings. But the association of these words with beings is a secondary aspect. The primary is the understanding that each of this is originally it has a meaning, it has an independent meaning in the very sounds of the word. Okay, and in that, Harihi represents the remover of obstacles. So anyone who is the remover is technically Harihi. Okay, and why do we associate them to deities and all of that? Is because when we are thinking about these beings who are in a certain sense in the manner in which, in the literature, in the manner in which they're presented to us, they're normally presented in an unblemished manner. And that's why they have a certain lordship about them. And when we associate with that, when we are thinking of that, then we are allowing that stainless being or that stainless reality, that stainless entity to impact our system. And by that, our obstacles are removed. What are our obstacles and impediments? Our own noisy structures. I mean, that's the biggest impediment. We imagine that obstacles are outside, and of course, there are obstacles outside, but we also know at the same time that external obstacles sometimes are perceived as opportunities. So, the bottom line of the obstacle is really within our system. And therefore, when we are saying Harihi, it's an invitation to remove the stains on our perception of the world also. I mean, these are all a lot of associated meanings I'm also offering you through this particular explanation. And you will get several others also. All right. But what is important is to go back to the root and know that it means the remover, the one who takes away. And that is the important thing to understand. Harihi is one who is a remover of obstacles. Now you can apply it to the range where it is applied, and then you understand why it is the case. So Harihi Om. Om itself is one of the greatest obstacle removers. And today we'll be discussing that in a little more depth. Okay. So let's do the Harihi Om. And then finally Iti, Atha. Therefore, henceforth. Henceforth. So let's do Om Trivaram. Trivaram Omkaram Kurmaha. Let's do that 3 times. Trivaram. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Atha. So in our last class, we were looking at the origins of sound and the origins of creation itself as being nothing but vibrations. And then I tried to show you about the nature or the quality of the different possible vibrations. So today I'll take that a little further and we'll discuss about why the Om itself is so important. And at the end of the class, like I'd mentioned, I will also divide one section of the class to revisiting the 5 lessons that you have looked at. That way there's a motivation, and if you have any questions and all, we can address them immediately. So we'll do it in that manner. And then maybe the last few minutes, I had some, some information to give you, which I will give you. All right, some announcements to make. Astu. So last time as we were seeing, I will start sharing my screen. Sundareshan, can I do it here? So we looked at language as being the story of sounds and vibrations. And then I had done a whole picture for you. I had drawn out on how you can have either the smoothened vibrations where there are resonances and frequencies. And we talked of the 4 levels of any speech, where there is the beyond, there is an ideal uncorrupted existence. Why? Because of the fact that this underlying energy which became the world it is Sat, it is self-conscious, therefore it is Chit, and because it is and it is conscious, it is spontaneously Ananda. And we did it with the sound A, and you realize that when you are in the experience of expansion, absolute expansion and being, absolute existence, then the nature of joy is natural. And that our reality is conditioned by our existential quality, is conditioned by the world around us. And therefore, also the fact that our degree of spontaneous joy is directly proportionate to our degree of spontaneous abandon of existence. So the more we live in our true self, the more spontaneous joy will be. And the moment we see that there is joy that is going, it means that we are catering to conditionings. This all emerges spontaneously from the understanding of that original energy being Satchidananda. And why? Because it is. There is no conditioning, no bound to it at all. And therefore it can be itself fully. And because it is conscious, everything that emerged initially from it will have conscious structures. And since it is unblemished, then the initial structures, the initial movements of consciousness would be untainted, which means that they would be in their ideal form. Now, as that ideal is moving out, so you can imagine like that. So if there is being that is engaging into becoming, so first there might have been simpler vibrations. And then as the vibrations become more complex, then it tends to have more interferences. There are more dark spots. There is more darknesses. There is more lack of clarity that emerges because of the multitude of interfaces of vibrations. There are many more interactions and intersections of vibratory vibrations that are taking place. And that then gives rise to different levels of darkness. And like we said, that manifestation, as it gets more and more dense, or those early vibrations, as it becomes more and more compact, it becomes materialized into the physical entity. So from an Indic psychology perspective, or from a yoga perspective, we talk of the spectrum of consciousness. And in that spectrum of consciousness, at one end, you have the what we call the divine possibilities. And what does divine mean? Divine comes from the root, or comes from the same origin as Deva. What is Deva? Deva comes from the root Div, which means light. So divine is nothing but light, essentially. So they are because it's conscious, so you would say they're conscious forces of light. And what do we mean by conscious forces of light? In that context, we have to understand the Vedic origin, the Vedic story of origins. And this is one of them. So when you look at the Vedic law, there are several versions of the origins of the universe. Okay, and as Rupaji also was telling us when she did the talk for Kharagpur, that the Nasadiya Sukta is one of the important ones, which says that there was na sadasi, so there was no truth. Maybe there was truth. Maybe we don't know. But one thing that everybody agrees with is that the foundational thing is consciousness. So Sat is the framework of the Indic worldview. And therefore that Sat is conscious, etc. So the Vedic origin said, one of the stories of the Vedas says that this Sat that was there wanted to experience multiplicity. Now it was everything, everywhere, but it wanted to experience multiplicity. So how could it experience multiplicity? Multiplicity in the sense of it wanted to experience being not it. So the only way that it could become not it was, because it was everything, was to then withdraw itself. When it withdrew its light, there was darkness that formed. So when we look at the different philosophical systems, like Nyaya, for example, Nyaya doesn't talk of light, of darkness as an absolute reality. It talks of darkness as an absence of light. So truth is falsehood is an absence of truth. Because the foundational idea is that of Sat. That is very important. And what is Sat? Nothing but being. So there is a truth basis, and when it wanted to create another, it withdrew itself and darkness formed. But in this darkness, the Vedas said, became shithili, because it didn't have any foundational existential value. So in order to give it some truth, a bit of this light plunged into that. And the whole of this game of existence is this bit of light that is trying to grow in the darkness. So from a Vedic perspective, when the question arises that, why is there so much of darkness? Why does darkness seem natural? Why does it feel natural to sink? That is because the material in which we are functioning is the darkness. And from a Vedic perspective, even this darkness is not unconscious, because there is no unconsciousness. When light withdrew, but it created this darkness, which also there is a conscious darkness within it. And so there are forces that are said, that are associated with it, because there is consciousness element. There is a intelligent element in that. So that is what we call the dasyus, or the asuras. Or asura is one of the terms for them. Okay, but the dasyu is one of them. So we look at that. Don't get into it right now. But the point is this: so the light that plunged into it is now trying to grow within it. But The long and short of it is that there was being, and now because of this game, it is in the phase of a becoming. And that becoming is when it emerged forth, it moved forth into the realm of creation. And when it moved forth in the realm of creation, then it also then it started also losing itself in the process of becoming the many. There was an element of allowing itself to forget itself, but that was the whole game, because the purpose was to forget, to rediscover. I mean, it was a great plot that that energy thought it was engaging in. From a human side, it doesn't always feel so funny and so amusing as a game, but I guess that's also because we have got so entangled with the becomingness that we lose touch of the being element. So because we've lost touch with the light, the world looks much darker. Okay, now why do I say all of this? Because when that vibration first started moving out, in its most simple form, when it was in the seed form and just emerging into creation, the seed in terms of the connection with the human being was represented by the sound Om. So what do we mean by it was represented by the sound Om? We mean that, how is the sound Om? So there's a physiological way of understanding the beauty of the sound and why it is often associated with so much of mysticism and, the sound of all creation. There's a very simple physiological phenomenon associated with it. And what is that? The sound Om is composed of two vowels. So there is an A and there is an U. So the first few sounds, the first few letters, the vowels that emerge, they're the simple sounds. There is no element of touch of the consonants. They're the simple sounds that came forth. So you have the A, and the very last sound that you can make is the U. So that's the guttural, and you have the labial U. Now that, in a sense, represents the entire range of sounds that the human vocal instrument can play. Now, if you wanted to create a maximum vibration in this particular range, where would you pluck the string? If you had a string and you wanted to create a maximum vibration in this, what would you do? By one pluck? Anybody?
In the center.
Middle portion.
Exactly. You would naturally pluck it in the middle, because when you pluck it in the middle, then the entire range is made to vibrate equally. Right? Everywhere there is an equal kind of a impact of that. If I press it more here, it will have one thing, but then it will taper down. If I do it here, it will taper down. So if I want to have the most ample vibration, I would automatically pluck it in the center. And if I pluck it in the center, then all the whole range is made to resonate in a most ample manner, maximum amplitude. Please correct me, because there are technical people here. So if I'm not using the correct technical terms, I'm more than happy to be corrected, because this is an example I cite often. So now what happens for the human vocal system? So you have the range R to U. Now if you try to do an R to U, so I request everybody to try that. So go from R to U. So so the sound that comes in the middle is the O. Automatically it is the O that comes in the middle, and the that you do then contains. So if you do the sound you will see corresponds to a kind of a settling down, an establishment. So with the Om, so imagine, so with the Om you pluck it and then you sort of contain it with the So when we, if you then talk of the sound of the universe, it's very interesting. I'm doing this other class with the Sanskrit yoga, and they were saying that, they said that if you listen to the sound of the creation, it seems to be, of the sound of the universe, it resembles the sound Om. And if you try and understand it, it could seem logical, because when there is a mixture of all the sounds, the base sound would be that center plucking sound that would be there, which the human instrument would reproduce as the Om. Okay. And why do we say that it has this mystical? Because once that center is plucked, from that everything else emerges. If that sound is there, then from that everything else can then emerge, because that's the most neutral sound as well. So when we are invited to do that as a practice, as a spiritual practice, you can imagine that our system, I will move on to the next one. Our system, as I showed you the last time, is more like this noisy thing where the physical is having its own vibratory nature, the emotional has its own dramas and its own patterns, the mind has its own dramas and its own patterns. So the sum total of our vibratory nature is pretty much a noisy structure. If I have to give an analogy, it's like a battlefield. Now, in a battlefield, if you want to, if you hear somebody play the flute very, very beautifully, not just the flute, it can be any instrument, but if it's loud and clear and single, you can be in the midst of a battlefield, but your ear will suddenly tune into that. And when the ear tunes into that, then at some level you're allowing the frequency of that to help the rest of your being start resonating with it. So in our noisy battlefield, which is also an analogy that is oft used in the Vedas, that we are a battlefield of what? We are this battlefield of two kinds of forces, the forces of darkness and the force. And this game, in another way, is all about, so I say that the summary of the Vedas is there are two things. We are basically through this game of existence, through this experience of a lifetime. I think my camera is frozen. I'll just get it back. So in this game of creation itself, as players, we have two options all the time. And the two options that the universe gives us, or like the creator, or the what do you say, the game planner allows us two possibilities in this. The first possibility is, are we playing the card of light or are we playing the card of darkness? Because if we are into this game, the objective, so there is a goal of every game. The goal is to increase more light. So that's why we are here. But whether we are reaching that goal or not, how it depends on the investment one is making moment to moment. And these are not like long term, because every little step will add up. The journey is on. That's another very important Vedic imagery. So you've got these three imageries, and I'll tell you that because contextually it becomes very relevant. So the Vedic thing says you've got three goals. The first, or rather, there are three imageries that the Vedic mystics talk about. So the first image is that of a battlefield, where this battle is taking place, and who's doing this battle. There are forces of light that are wanting to win us, and there are forces of darkness that are trying to retain those darknesses. And the individual, the human leader, the person has the choice of which army they want to fight with. I mean, the Gita is nothing but another kind of another depiction of that same battle. In every case, you will see this battle, and the battle is a recurring theme across all cultures that have a mystical tradition. And that's what's so beautiful about it, that there is no monopolizing of this. And why no monopolizing? Because this game was not meant for segments of humanity. This game was the game of the universe. And the human being was important in this larger plot. And the human being is the same across. The original, the potential of the human being is the same. And then, because we lost track of that common unity between us, we got stuck in our narrower identities, and that creates its own darknesses, basically. But it is important to remember this. So the battlefield of these two forces that are playing. The second image is that of a yajna. And what is the yajna saying? So the yajna, the word yajna comes from yaj, which goes back to the root yat. Yat is the English equivalent of who. So the one who plays win, or the one who enjoys wins the game, let's say, or the one who smiles is happy. Let's supposing. So the moment you say the one who, you cannot stop there. You have to say the next part, because there is a recognition that this is one which will lead to the next. And that is the reality of the universe, that everything is in this process of an action reaction. Whatever we do will have consequences because we are in movement. So you do it, pluck it here, it will it will have rippling effects somewhere or the other. Whether we encounter it or we don't encounter it, whether we are aware of it or not, effects are taking place. And therefore, the call on the individual to perform this yajna consciously. Okay, so that original yajna was not just this ritualistic thing, it was about the recognition that we are in a process of exchange all the time. Therefore, are we giving? So the first question was, whom are you offering to? Are you offering to light or are you offering to darkness? It was another image. The same question, but through a different image. Are we offering? To whom are we offering? Then the second question is, why are we offering? That why is also very fundamental, because if I am offering to knowledge, let's say, but I'm offering to knowledge because I want to get fame, then what I will indirectly pursue is fame, and I will try and get that by hook or crook. Knowledge will be a tool, knowledge will not be my end. So if I'm offering, so becoming conscious of the why, so when I'm doing it only for fame, again, it becomes a narrow, self-limited, motivation, which again goes into the realm of the dasyus and the darkness. Okay, because sooner or later we will encounter a kind of a block. Okay, so so whom are we offering to and why are we offering is very important. Then the next thing is, how are we offering it? So like we know in the yajna, you first light the fire, Agni. Why is that substance known as Agni? Because Agre Nayati iti Agni. So I'd like you to start, I mean, I'm sure you've already got it, but the taste of the fact that most of the Sanskrit words can be drawn back to root sounds, root concepts, which are independent of the attributions they acquire. So Agre Nayati iti Agni, that which takes us forward. So psychologically, what takes us forward? It's our willpower. What took creation forward? It's that original will to discover itself. So when we talk in the Veda of Agni being the Jata Veda, because in the Vedic imagery, it is Agni who took that first plunge in the darkness. He says, I'll be the first god. That's why he's the Purohita, the one whom you place in front. Because then he becomes the carrier of our aspirations. Why? Because that fire substance is always burning upwards. No matter which direction you put it in, it will always burn upwards. Just like the will, the original will in us, the aspiration within us. So when we say you have to light the fire, you have to light Agni. It is that Agni within that has to be lit. When that Agni is lit, then you have to keep that Agni kindled. And in the Vedas, one of the epithets, the other epithet for Agni is Jata Veda. It is the knower of all births. Why? Because it is that original Agni in every single thing that exists on creation that keeps creation going. If there was no Agni, nothing would be. And therefore, we talk of various kinds of Agni, etc., etc. All right, but it's enough to know that we need to kindle that Agni. How do we kindle it? With our thoughts, the ghee. So what is ghee or ghritam? Ghritam comes from the root grit, shine. So they are the shining elements in us. What are the shining elements? Clarity of thought. So I was saying last time also that the head is normally like this opaque butter. There is no translucency, there is no transparency. So when we add that Agni to it, that willpower, I know this is what I want to do. The more clarity there is about this is what I want to do, you will see that the path will also start getting illuminated. When the path gets illuminated, the willpower, the aspiration is further ignited. And that's what happens literally. You pour the ghee, the fire burns bright, the fire then melts the butter and then more ghee. And that's the cycle that goes on ritualistically. All right. And so that was there. And then what else do you do when you do the yajna? There's the mantra. What is the mantra? And that is connected directly with what we are talking about. The mantra is the word of truth. Why? Because it is connected to para. You remember we talked of the 4 levels of para pashyanti. And we see that when there is no interference between the original, the source, the ideal, and the expression of Vaikhari, then it becomes like a laser. So the mantra is the word of truth that is uttered. So if I have a willpower, I want to do that, the more I'm able to talk about it in the right context, to the right people, the faster will I achieve what I want to do. There are many of us who, if I want to do something, they will say just the opposite. Why would people say the opposite? Because they're afraid. You see, the moment there is fear, the moment there is anxiety, the moment there is insecurity, these are all, in the Vedas, they call them the vritra, the panis, the tasyus. They are those who cover up our light and they don't want us to be free. So they, and you will see, so it's actually fascinating where psychologically this plays such an important role. Okay, so we need to utter the mantra, the word of truth. What else? We have to pour the purnahuti of the soma. So what is the soma? It comes from the root su. Su means to press out. In ritualistically, it is said to be the juice, the intoxicating drink, which is also known as somapana, etc. That has happened. But what is that original cause why anything happened? What is it that is lost behind the forests of the world, of these vibratory natures? It's that original delight that has got lost in the conditionings of beings, of creation itself. So Su is being able to press out that original sap or that original delight of existence, is what Sri Aurobindo says. So this entire psycho-spiritual interpretation is what Sri Aurobindo talks about in his text, The Secret of the Veda. And how did he write The Secret of the Veda? He first had experiences when he was in the prison of these psychological, psycho-spiritual truths. When he read the Vedas, he said, "Arey, this is what I know they're talking about." And then he said that the Vedas, which traditionally also could be interpreted at three levels. There is the physical truth of it, where there are the rituals and all of that, which would make sense because at a certain level, because reality, it's that same reality that is manifesting itself at various planes of our existence. So you can inversely go through those planes to that reality. This is again key. So what are those things? So in the physical, so there is the Adi Bhautika level, the physical world, where its reflections are there and it has meaning. It's a different thing whether we have retained the purity of the meaning. That's a different question. But the original rituals are not empty of true content, is what I would say. Okay. Then the second part is the Adi Daivika, to recognize that it's not just the matter, but there is a consciousness behind it. There is an interlinking presence. And those were the godheads in the Vedic lore. And then beyond that is the ideal or the Adhyatmika. So Adi Bhautika, Adi Daivika, and Adhyatmika. These three levels were there. So the Su, or what Sri Aurobindo says is that while these two levels are true, the essence of the Veda lies in its third meaning. And that's when you get a consistency across texts. I will give you an example. So he says in the Vedas, the horses of Indra are described as Ghritashnu. Ghritashnu means dripping with ghee. So very literally, it would seem absurd. So when European Indologists translated the Vedas, they gave them these literal meanings. There were reasons. They had they had nefarious reasons also why they did it that way, because of a civilizational destruction that was part of their plan. But behind that, there was also the fact that they did not have access to the other way of understanding things. So when they gave it a literal meaning, it became Indra's horses are dripping with ghee, which obviously seems very barbaric. And what are these people talking about? And there was a war of clans and a war of tribes, etc. So it becomes a very reduced level of the original sense. If you give it the psycho-spiritual meaning, Ghrita is the shining thoughts. Ghritasnu means dripping or full of that. What are Ashwa? Ashwa is nothing but the spiritual forces, of whom? Of Indra. Indra represents the illumined mind. So Agni and Indra are the two most important devatas of the Rig Veda, because they represent the Agni, the aspiration first, and that is the most important thing that needs to be nourished and kindled. Second is Indra, the upward movement. So the mind being the highest. We are Manu, so we are mind creatures. That's where we are Manushya, and that's where the word man also comes from. So we need to have that aspiration to look upwards. Okay, when the mind has a certain illuminated quality, then it becomes capable of connecting to the original blueprint of things, which is the para level of things. Okay, the Satya that the Vedas talks about. When it is in connection with Satya, then the actions that it undertake is the Rita. And if you look at this design that I have here, the graph that I have here. So Satya is the original blueprint. Now I've given it this form here. Okay, Rita is when you're doing, you know it, and then you're replicating that in manifestation. So Satya is in potential, Ritam is in manifestation. So it's dynamic truth in action is what Sri Aurobindo says. So when you do that, so if you have a sound and you play exactly the same one, you get an amplification, which is Brihat. And that Brihat is the same root as Brahman. So the sense of amplification happens when we are in consonance or in resonance with the truth of things. This is very obvious when we do in singing, for example. If there is a note and you play the right note, you will automatically experience a kind of an experience. If somebody is playing it, you hear it. If somebody sounds, and therefore when somebody is not sounding it correct, it's like you feel it that it's not fully right. That not fully right is the anritam that you see here. Anritam is when it is not right. And this not right, this anritam is also what the concept of mithya was. That asatya, when it is not right. And therefore, in the Indic civilization, from the Vedic perspective, there was no concept of the sin. The idea of sin doesn't exist. In fact, even if you go to the Christian literature, if you go further down, the word for sin is not exactly sin. It has the connotation of not right. And why is it sinful? Because the moment it is not right, there is an extra trajectory to be made. And that extra trajectory is the extra karmic baggages that we are adding on. It's the extra noise that we are creating. It's the extra darkness that is generated. Okay, so this is very important. And what does the Vedas say? The Vedas says that the characteristic of Swarga, this absolute state, is the Satyam, Ritam, Brihat, which means that there are truth patterns, there are practices of truth patterns. The consequence is Sukha, which means Yovai Bhumata, that which is expansive, is Brihat, or the vast. All right, so like I was saying the other day, that we have the option. So Satya is the highway. We can either be on the highway or we can be on the my way. The moment we are on the my way, we are on the Anrita part, because we don't always know what the Rita is. And the idea therefore is to combine the my way to the highway. When the my way becomes the highway, then we reach the destination the fastest. Okay. In terms of vibrations, if there is a full alignment, then light can shine through fastest also. So we see that there are so many directions of all of this, and therefore, in the Indic civilization, when the Bharatiya nation, when the Indian nation was formed, we chose the motto, which is Satyam Eva Jayate, from the Rig Veda. So what? From the Mundakopanishad. From the, I will request Muthuji to silence. I'm not being able to silence him. So from the Mundakopanishad, we have the idea of the Satyameva Jayate Nanritam. So that truth alone is the victor. Why? Because of the patterns. And that Na Anritam, Nanritam, what will give us victory is that original pattern. So when we have, I think that we have done ourselves disservice by taking out the second part, because by making it truth alone wins, we have started subjectivizing it. Your truth, my truth, no absolute truth. But that's not what is being said. What is being said is that there is an optimum. There is an ideal for every single thing in the world. When there is an ideal, then replicating that ideal is the ideal for the manifestation. The more we approximate it, the more abundance we will get, the more prosperity will happen in every aspect of our existence. It's incredible how foundational this framework is in determining anything we do. All right. And so we have this thing of the Ritam. And therefore, Satyam Eva Jayate Nanritam. And I will add one last word here, and then I will just quickly we look through the Sanskrit. I was saying that the initial classes, it's easier for me to, go do the philosophy more, because it's important to get these ideas. Then you will understand why Ritam is so important. Why does Sanskrit become so important? Why is there such a call for the correctness and precision of the sounds? Because of the understanding that if it is not Ritam, you are creating Anritam, and thereby you're generating some form of noise or the other, despite all one's good intentions. I will also talk about the relationship between intentions and sound production. We'll talk about all of that. All right. But there is a desirable ideal. in everything. There is a desirable perfection, that purnata, that correctness of things. Okay, why does that become again one of the most key concepts of the Indic civilization? So we have, I will give you the example of the glove. So if I'm trying to buy a glove for myself, I will not tell XYZ to get me a glove that I need to do surgery with. Why? Because if I'm wearing a loose glove, the work that I will do will not be ideal. If I'm wearing a glove that is too tight, again, I will be constricted and I will not be able to do the ideal work. Therefore, it becomes important to first and foremost know the contours of my hand. Every hand is unique. I wear one glove and I tell everybody to wear, I've again lost the plot. That's why civilizationally we were keen on trying to have the notion of swadharma, that everybody has their own truth at the same time. So there is this specificity that was there, but some things have a universal quality. So always this relationship between knowing what is generalizable as a universal thing and what is specific for that specific thing. This viveka, this ability to have the discretion between the two was again key. Because if that is lost, we are again doing Anrita. You're applying universals on general, on specifics, and you're applying specifics on general. We lost the plot again. So what did they say? That first and foremost, it's important for each of us to know the contours of our hand. And that is the satya of our hand. Then you wear a glove that fits it exactly, the rita, the rhythm for my hand. When that happens, then the work that I can do wearing that glove will be of the best quality. It will be Sanskritam. It will be Samyak Kritam. I will be able to do the most delicate of works, provided I have the skill. But taking for granted that I have the skill and all, and I'm just looking about, I'm talking about the glove here, I will be able to do the most incisive work if I'm wearing the right thing. What happens if I'm wearing the right glove? That glove will hold my hand in the best way possible. If I'm wearing the best glove, the right glove, when it holds my hand in the best way possible, then my hand is dhrita or held. Dharma is nothing but coming from the root dhr, which means to uphold. So the idea of dharma is not about religion or this or that. Dharma in its original sense means upholding anything in its ideal. So the practice of dharma has implied within it the understanding of satya and the practice of rita. So it requires, when we say that dharma, iska dharma ye hai, it implies that one has to know what the ideal is, and one has to know what the practice is in order to make that truth happen. All right. So if you see, this civilization was not so preoccupied about the good life and all of that. It was preoccupied about doing things the right way. It was preoccupied about dharma. That if everything followed its right dharma, and it said that everything has its own dharma. Very interestingly, in engineering, in the civil engineering context, they talk of every building having its natural frequency. So everything has its natural frequency, which is the original sound or the original satya of that. When we are able to replicate it, then we are upholding that in its best way possible. Okay, so that was the idea of dharma. And now you start understanding why words like satya, dharma, rita are non-translatables in a particular sense. It's not easy to just say right. So rhythm is also, rit is also the root of right, the English word right. And right can only happen if there is a standard. There is a standard and then we say this is right. So the word right implies a knowledge of something that is. Astu. And therefore the consequence would be the best. So if you look at societies that are more conscious in terms of what are the ideals, what are, in whichever way they have framed it, and they're able to do it, they will be spontaneously more prosperous. When dharma gets lost, dharma is natural to be lost as well. That is what we are told. Why is it natural to lose it? Because the one who saw it transfers it. The next person has not necessarily seen it. So they are giving already their layer of interpretation. The next one is transferring it all. So it's like the Chinese whisper. So by the time it reaches the man at the bottom of the man or woman at the, later down the age, and that's why the concept of the 4 ages. where gradually there is a corruption, there is a corruption, there is a corruption. So we are in this age where we are in the dharma standing on one leg and as tottering as it can be. But there's no need to get discouraged because that's part of it. But the point is, how do we turn it around? Can we start re-articulating? Can we start becoming aware of them, re-articulating them, re-practicing them? That's the task. Why do we do it? Because our fundamental investment can be of two kinds: either investing in light or investing in darkness, either investing in expansion or investing in contraction. Very simple. And depending on that, we will determine the nature of our lives. And you multiply our lives, it becomes society and then the larger reality and the world. So, very interestingly, Corona here is also to force us to recognize that, we are completely off track in so many things. Can we get together as families? Can we get into ourselves instead of being all the time outside? Can we fall back into trying to go home on various planes? Okay, so I think that is good for trying to understand this larger plot, and where there is a consonance, there is a good reflection of them. That is what is the Satya. So the word Satya is interesting because it comes from the root Sat. What is Sat? Sat comes from the root As, to be, and Satya literally means, so Sat means being, Satya means beingness. So what is truth? Truth is nothing but beingness. When we are not in beingness, we are asatya. So what does being imply is the whole question. And that is the goal of, that is also one of the important practices of the Yoga Sutra, of the yamas, that practice being. And because we are so caught up in the becoming that we forget that. So we'll see how this language also, if you do it in the spirit of the language, forces us to reconnect to this beingness quality of ourselves. Astu. So I think I will stop here with that. And then maybe just quickly I'll go through the slides, and if there's anybody who has anything, because in my slides, I'm also talking a lot of some of the things I've mentioned here. I have given this a more philosophical bent because it's important to understand this concept of the yogic direction. What is it, the way I get it, and how I link it to the language aspect. So just the sattvika is the quality of sattva, and therefore the more alignments, the more transparency, the more the light, the more the expansion, the more sattvika we are. So how is that happening? By the vibratory nature of our inner being. But it's in the sattvika, there is more of the beingness. The moment we get into the becoming, that first movements that we go into, where the prana is more agitated, there is this, the concept of the agency in the sattvika thing. There is more the notion of an instrumentality of being. The more that the concept of the instrumentality turns towards agency, the first part of I'm the doer, I'm the thinker, I'm the enjoyer, all of that, then it starts becoming rajasika. But still there is the agency. The individual still has a consciousness of this is what I want to do, this is what I want to get. Then what happens is that there is another whole mass of humanity that is completely not even aware of who they are, nor are they aware of what they want. In which case it is the world that tells them what they want to be. And that is where we get into the realm of the tamasika, where there is so much of lack of clarity and lack of things for various reasons. And it is at different times for different people. There is no homogeneous oneness about these things. There are tendencies. People are more, tend to be more of this or more of that, but largely there are tendencies, but nothing is absolute. Everything is possible to, one can remold and recraft everything. Even physiologically with neuroplasticity, everything can be remolded. As to why? For the simple reason that we are nothing but that energy, conscious energy. So very, very technically, nothing is undoable. As to, there's a pun on that. Nothing is undoable in the sense that nothing can be not done. So everything can be done. And nothing is undoable in the senses that we can also undo. So there's a negative situation, you can also undo them. Okay, so that was that. And that is the tamas, or the darkness part of it. And rajas has to do with raja, the sense of I am the Lord, I am the doer, that kind of a sense of one's life. So I think that is good. I will take the last part, the other part of it in the next class. So we have just a few minutes. I would try to still very ambitiously do the, I will very ambitiously try and do the slides. So if you can give me another 5 minutes, I'll try and wrap it up here. Yeah. So in the first one, I was just talking of, just to give what are the objectives of the course. So these are all things that you would have read. I mean, doesn't need much of an explanation, etc. So I've talked about the etymology of coming from lingua. Why? Because if the tongue is cut, then we can't speak. We can't use the sound emerging. That's why the tongue was important for the linguistic, for the language, for the expression of language. And bhasha was to give light, and therefore the great importance to what is the nature of the language that is used and how is it being used. Okay, so the correctness of vocabulary, the correctness of grammar, the content had to be worthy, the way in which it was being uttered. All of this was given great deal of importance in the yogic text for the simple reason that it is an illuminator of what is happening in our system. Okay. And this idea that vak and artha are embedded, intrinsically embedded. That was important because sound is producer of effect. And then is it important that it's not enough to communicate and all of this? So I will quickly go over this because this is just more of just ideas that is being talked about. And then the next one, I mean, there are great quotes. We just have to read enough of them. So the next one is about understanding the sound structure. So this is something that I would like us to, we'll start looking at it next time. When we're talking of rhythm, so first and foremost, you recognize those, I've been asking you to do this exercise of trying to represent Sanskrit words or the Devanagari in Roman script. And I think one of the challenges that many of you would have faced. So maybe I'll just ask it quickly and I'll look at your answers. So if you'd like to answer. Can we get the presentation which you're sharing? Not yet, I will share it later on. I would just request you to share what was the difficulties that you faced when you were trying to write Devanagari into Roman. Maybe if you can just share some of it here, then I'll get an idea. Yeah, tell me. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Where to put caps and where to put small letter, that was a...
Very good. Very good. So one of the things you notice directly is the script. In the script, English has capital letters. Devanagari doesn't have any capital letters, just in terms of visual. So what does that do? You write a capital I versus a small I, and you will do it as an exercise for some time. Just do it for an exercise for a few days, and you will see very interesting shifts happening. That instead of a capital I, if you write a small I, what difference does it really make? Does it make a difference or does it not? All right. German language capitalizes the first letter of every noun. So that's also interesting. What is the capital really doing? What he's talking is when we are writing the Roman, I sometimes put a capital A or capital S. So the first thing that you notice is that there is no one-to-one correspondence between the Sanskrit letters and the Roman alphabet, Roman script, because there are 26 letters in the alphabet, English alphabet, and there are 50 letters, 52 in the Sanskrit one. So there is no one-to-one correspondence, and therefore, in English, the small a can sometimes be an a, sometimes an and that's why you have Himalaya. You write Himalaya, and if you write Himala, there is no way, and you can't blame anybody. There's no way that the person would know that I have to say Himalaya. Okay, because Himalaya, Himalaya, all of them is correct technically from a Roman script perspective. But or for example, another word from a yogic perspective we have to really get right is the word hatha. It is written Hatha, but the th is a tha. It is not a hatha. So many yoga teachers make this, and Indian yoga teachers also make this mistake, and it is a grave mistake in a certain sense, because hatha doesn't mean anything in the Sanskrit language, whereas hatha means applying of a force. So if you're saying hatha to hatha, we are not making sense other than the fact that it is written and we know that the script corresponds to, we just know that the script is the same. But pronunciation is very important. So hatha, and when you say hatha, it is also a yogic exercise, just the pronunciation of that. So what I would tend to do is make the A's capital. When it's A, all the long vowels tend to make it capital. The murdha sound, so r, sh, r, t, th, d, d, n, tend to make it capital. So sa is the regular S, sh, the talavya sh becomes sh, but there is no standardization when we're trying to do the phonetics of it like that. Just, tampering a little bit. There is a universal transliteration, which is by using lines and dots, which is what is here. So what you see here is the universal transliteration. So A with a line on top, but this is not something that all our systems allow or can do. Even my great Mac can't do a few of these letters. So sometimes I have to let go. All right, but what it does is that it allows precision of sound relationship of one to one letter to one sound, one letter to one sound. And this has huge implications in terms of learners, etc. Okay, so very quickly, so this is something we look at. So I'll not pause on that much more. And this is something we look at when we come to words. Okay, we'll come to words even through this presentation, and that's when I will touch on these.
Sha and Sha.
Yeah, sh and sh. We'll do the alphabet next time. Yeah, we'll do the alphabet next time. So I'll take you through the entire bit. So this is very interesting. They say that Sanskrit not only is not just a dead language, but it can also make a dead person come alive. There was another important thing. There were people who told me that, they are not, that my slides are mistaken because the E is doing all sorts of funny things. That's because of the system that you're using, which is distorting the letters. Okay. So these were the basic greetings. So Suprabhatam, in the afternoon is Sumadhyahnam, in the evening it's Susayam, and Suratri, Shubharatri, and Punar Milamaha. And simple things like Sarvam Kushalam Kim, is everything okay? Yes, Sarvam Kushalam, Na Sarvam Kushalam Nasti, not well. All right. So I would highly recommend you to start incorporating this in your daily things, and for multiple reasons. One is, of course, the practice, and the more often you do it, the easier it sticks in the brain. So this is something that I've been requesting you to do on the chat, where you say Mamma Nama. The question for a man is Bhavataha. The Hindi equivalent would be Aapka Naam. Okay. But in Hindi, when you say Aapka, there is no gender differentiation. In Sanskrit, there is. So Bhavataha and Bhavatyaha. And an informal is Tumhara Naam is Tava Naam Kim. Okay. And then this is something that is interesting. In English, when you say he, there is no distance that is incorporated. You will not say he that and he this. In Sanskrit, when you're saying he, when you're indicating saha, it is that. So masculine that. So it's very interesting again and important for me to tell you that the notion of gender, maybe I'll take this up next time, but just if you just go through this, because that goes into the philosophical thing. But just for now, know that for the masculine far, it is saha and eshaha. You have other synonyms as well, but we have taken these because of the ending, which is akara ending, which is what we are going to be studying more. Sa and esha, feminine, and the question is ka. So the question word is also becoming specific to the gender, also to the gender mainly. Tat and etat. So the neuter, that is important. Tat and etat. So if you want to say Saha Rabindranath, and this is the exercise that I'm doing on my video, so I will not say much more there. And then, of course, there is this concept of asti and nasti. There is and there is no. So I think what I will do is I'll try and do a little more of this when we meet the next time, just to respect your time as well. So for today, I will stop on this. I will take up the difference between this just quickly. Maybe Bhavan and Bhavati is up. Bhavataha is apka. Bhavan is up. And Bhavati is up, feminine. And aham is I. Okay. So if you go through this, you already start entering into some Upanishadic literature as well. And then there are some basic verbs that are there. So I would suggest that you start practicing these verbs. Like I said, I'll pause for now on this. We'll look at it a little more next time. But what I really recommend is that you start practicing these verbs. And what I would even more recommend is that you start Sanskritizing English or the language that you're familiar with. So if you don't know the verb, so goes, I don't know what, I've forgotten what goes is. but I need to remember the ending. It is important to remember the endings of the verb. So goes ti, gachati, goes ti, eats ti. That is what is important. And when you get the verb, you'll remember the word. So what you need to remember is the ending of the words initially, is what I would emphasize on. So you're not trying to get, all of it right all the time. Just get the important thing right. And the crux of Sanskrit is the endings most often. So just focus on getting that right for now. Okay, but start practicing it in your day. And it's a game. See how much of English you can Sanskritize, or Bengali you can Sanskritize, or whatever, whichever your regional languages, Spanish or, Portuguese or whatever you speak. Asu. So I think that is good. And yes. So there is just one last part of it, which is also I said I'll make some announcements. So one of the announcements would be regarding the Guru Dakshina thing. I've still not been able to get the Gurukula details because I'm not able to contact that person who's out of reach. But I also, in the meanwhile, came across two other organizations, that I'm associated with. There is another one called Rescue and Relief Foundation. It's run by a very young couple. It's in Kolkata-based one. And they have rescued more than, they have about 700 or 750 plus trafficked children, trafficked women, whom they are giving shelter to. They also are looking after handicapped children, old age home, orphan. Now they've really diversified. The latest addition might be acid victims. So I'm also going to make that organization a possible place for donation. Another one is Dreams for Life. It's by a very close friend of mine who runs it for children. It's run by school children and guided by their teacher. It's about helping educate slum children, etc. And also old age homes. They go and distribute things in old age homes, etc. So what I will do is I will make these few possibilities available. If you can share the money and distribute all of them, it will add to everybody's kitty, and that is really required in these times also. But feel free to give where you want to. All right. But I think, like I would also emphasize from my side, please at least teach one more person. More than anything else, it is about reinforcing it for yourselves. When you are looking at it, when you're listening to it, it's passive learning. When you're trying to instruct somebody else, it turns into active learning. And that active one is what will start forming new neural pathways that will get reinforced. When it gets reinforced, then it becomes internalized in your system. So use all these techniques to speeden up your own learning. Because when you try to apply, you will realize, what is it I don't know? With passive learning, there is an impression that I have understood. But when you start applying it, then suddenly you say, "Arey yaar, ye to yaad nahi ho raha." Okay. So that is why you need to try and teach somebody else. That is the whole thing. So let's close for now. And I would suggest we close with Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavan. Anybody has any question? Maybe 1 minute or so. Sorry. What I will do for everybody.
Ma'am, I have a question.
We are over time. What I suggest we do is that we close it here. Those who have questions and would like to stay back a little longer, maybe another 5-10 minutes, can stay back. But I think we'll just close it here for now, so that those who need to leave, because some have already left, we will end the session here formally. All right. So we'll do Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. And please put it in all the levels of your transmission. We are transmitting beings. We are beings that are vibrating and sending out vibrations. Let's try and make that as sat as possible, as satyam as possible. So with this Loka Samasta, let's try and radiate as much of this excellent space as possible, because there is a great need for that light. Chalatu. Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.